Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. Let me ask all of you that sit on the back to come to the front, please.
앞으로 좀 나와주시면 좋겠습니다. 예, 밖에 계신 분들 들어오시고요. 예.
So I ask Professor Park to turn off the lights because I'm not the subject of this talk. I want you to be focused on what I'm showing here on the screen. And the second thing is I'm not going to ask Professor Park to translate every slide. Otherwise, we're going to stay here for the next immortality.
Okay.
Instead, I will show chapters. I have 4 chapters. And then by the end of each chapter, you can ask questions, and Professor Park can also translate. And we'll try to do it like that. It's very visual, so I think it will be very communicative.
예,
So,
보시면 4가지 챕터가 있고요. 주로 뭐 통역할 게 별로 없다. 마지막에 이제 Q&A 할 때만 통역하면 된다. 그래서 통역을 안 하겠습니다. 이성환 선생님 잘 보세요. 우리 이렇게 만들어야 되니까 분당을.
okay.
I will not translate, so you can go ahead.
So I'm coming from MIT. How many of you know about MIT? Just show your hands. Okay, so you also understand English, so it's perfect. MIT is a very big building. It's a very, very big building. You can see it's spanning right from here, 77 Mass Ave, and you can go inside one building all the way to the end. But inside MIT, there is only one laboratory. There is only one department that has its own building, which is the MIT Media Lab, where I work. And for many years, I kind of struggled with the question, why do we have our own building? And then I came across a talk by Nicolas Negroponte, the head of the Media Lab, the person who established the Media Lab. And he said, the Media Lab is the Salon des Refusés, which in French, I don't speak French. In French, it means the place of the unwanted. Those misfits, those people who couldn't find themselves in any other place at MIT, gathered together and came to the Media Lab to do what we called an anti-disciplinary research. Now, what is anti-disciplinary? We have about 30 different labs or groups within the Media Lab. Each one of them is doing very different stuff, so I'm going to give you just a quick example of the research done in the Media Lab. The e-ink that you can find on your Amazon Kindle or many other mobile devices was invented there. Professor Yu Hare is building robotic legs, artificial robotic legs, powered by machine learning that allow him, after losing both of his legs in climbing accident when he was 17, to walk like a regular person at MIT. This is an amazing thing to see, and I see it almost every day. Somewhere in the 80s, a group of students and researchers went to Aspen and took some videos with their car and then sat back in the lab and looked at these videos, and that became Google Street View that you all know about. The Guitar Hero. Does anybody play Guitar Hero here? Show me your hands. I'm playing Guitar Hero. Don't be shy. That was invented in the Media Lab, and this is one of the good examples of how the Media Lab is connecting computers and tangible user interfaces. It's a thing we work a lot about, how you make this computer-human interaction. These fine-looking men look very odd in 1995, but we all have wearable computing nowadays on our bodies. They were the pioneers, and we actually using all of the technology that they have established. The Media Lab has many different market or industry corporates. That's how we fund the research. And within those 30 groups, our group is called City Science, and we're asking ourselves only one simple question. What is the future of our cities? How do we move forward with cities? Now, I guess most of you have heard at least some of these terms, right? Smart cities, global cities, green cities, trends. But I think that the starting point for this talk should be what cities are. What do we really mean then when we talk about cities? And this question becomes more interesting when we look at, for example, the sprawling suburbs of Beijing versus the favelas of Rio de Janeiro versus the beautiful grid by Cerdà in Barcelona. These are all cities, but they're very, very different from one another. So let me give you a very short introduction to what at least we call cities at the Media Lab. So most of the cities starts with this, a water body or kind of an urban amenity that feeds the city. If we go 3,000 years BC, we see the city of Mare on the borderline of the Euphrates, you can see that this city has kind of a prehistoric infrastructure or a highway. Right? This river is cleaning the city, it's feeding the city, it's feeding the, the crops, and it's also cleaning the city. What is more interesting is that the city is developing around this water body in a perfect shape. Right? And this is 3,000 years BC. And what is even more interesting is that all of other cities that we go from the same period have exactly the same shape. Now, there is no internet 3,000 years before. We cannot copy-paste plans like some architects in this room are currently doing, I assume. Right? We cannot do that anymore. What is the DNA that brings all of these cities to be exactly the same? Can somebody guess? And I take a sip of water. Can somebody guess why all of these cities are exactly the same? Yes?
Maybe like people want to live, first of all, live together, like helping each other. That's why the cities are centralized. And then also, maybe I will guess there's a hierarchy systems, like kings there and other people.
So I think your first point was exactly true. We want to live together, meaning we can be in physical contact to other people, meaning we can go or walk. If we talk about 3,000 years BC, we can walk a certain distance. This is exactly the distance each one of us, regardless of our age, regardless if we're immortal, can walk. Right? About 20 minutes, 1 kilometer, that's the distance in any city. Doesn't matter where we are. And what is more interesting is that when we look at modern cities like Paris, when it developed towards the 19th century, it kept the same structure. So this is the old Paris in the surrounded by the black line. But around it, we see many small 20-minute cities. So instead of talking about one city, we talk about dozens of city of Marais that basically compose of Paris, right? And with the simple tools that we have today, like Google Maps, we can map out all the amenities and see how the city is beautifully spread between, shops, cafes, physicians, pharmacies, because each one of these is sitting within a city. And the city needs cafes, and the city needs shops, and so forth. Now, all of that was true until the 19th century, as long as we were walking or using maybe an animal to move in the city, but everything changed with the Industrial Revolution, right? The Industrial Revolution introduced a lot of new industry into the city, factories, pollution, disease, war, which pushed people outside of the city. The second Industrial Revolution introduced the car, which supported this movement outside of the city perfectly. Now I can live in the perfect suburb, and every time I need to go back to the city, I just take a car, right? And of course, we all know today, and all the research is showing that this is just a fake news, if you want. The third Industrial Revolution, the one that we are currently in, was supposed to basically allow us clean tech and maybe bring us back to the city, but instead of that, it gave us this. Now, what is that? This is the mixture between the two bad parts of the previous ones, right? You have the density of the city in the tower, but you're still heavily reliant on the car. Now, usually these are the cities that you will see in all of the smart cities conferences being dubbed as very smart because there is a sensor here which makes the city very, very smart. Not just in India or in China or in other places, even here, I did a small research before I came and I realized that not so far from here, the government is now planning a smart city that will eliminate the need for car. And let me just ask you one simple question. Is this walkable? If I live here in the residential district and I work here in the commercial district or the business district, is that walkable? Not sure.
Take a bicycle.
Try. Do it on a winter day and we'll speak after. And by the way, if you have your bicycle, how do you cross how much is this? I think it's 11 lanes. Right, is that accessible? And is that car free? I'm not sure. So I think this is kind of emphasizing the question, right? Because there are a lot of trends and a lot of discussion about what is right and wrong for our cities, but I think that the basic norms of what historically was composing our cities kind of lost. And I want to show you basically the way us in our group trying to tackle these questions and maybe bring us back to those old cities. We're doing it with 3 different research topics. We have mobility on demand, we have places of living and working, and we have urban simulation. And if Professor Park want to maybe say something about the first chapter, because I'm jumping to the next one.
Oh, I wasn't.
Wasn't taking note. That's fine. I can go on.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
go on, please.
So these are the 3 main research themes we're dealing with. And when we talk about mobility on demand, so as I mentioned, the best way to move in the city is to walk. But not all cities are built for walkability. So below the dotted line, you can see all the types of mobility on demand solutions that we have developed in my group. And I'm going to touch on 2 of them pretty quickly. The MIT City Car was a pretty famous project, started somewhere 13 years ago, where we came up with a strategy that said, can we make a smaller, shared, and an electric car that could park in a very, very small parking area. You can see here it's about 1/3 or 1/4 of a regular car. It's folding. It's taking the size of half of a smart car, which is already a small car. And that was all fine. But I'm not going to dwell too much on this project from 2 main reasons. One, because the company that built the car got bankrupt and lost all of his money, which is happening every once in a while. But more importantly, because we realized that solving parking issues in the city would not happen through making the car smaller. That's like putting a Band-Aid on a cancer, if you want. Right? The way we solve parking issues or transportation issues in general in cities is by what we call the mobility trifecta, which is we support public transportation, and then we have vehicles which are both shared, autonomous, and electric vehicles. This is the way we move today. And when we start thinking about sharing, we realize that bike sharing is booming, right? There is a great bike sharing system here in Seoul. There are amazing bike sharing system in China, in India, and many other places in the world. You can see
What
that.
are you doing winter?
Sorry?
What are you doing winter? Which is what you told me before.
In the new district of Seoul, not in every city. That depends on where you travel, how much you need to travel with your vehicle. Let me show you that in a second. So we are talking about bike sharing, and we realized, by the way, to your question, you have a roof, that bike sharing is not only used for people mover, but also for goods mover. So UPS, for example, has a bike sharing system that is used to move their goods within the city. And we ask ourselves, how can we collaborate between the 3 advantages? We have bike sharing system, we have good bike networks in the city, and then we have the need to move people, which brought us to the PEV. The PEV is standing for a persuasive electric vehicle. That's an electric tricycle, if you want. It's not a vehicle, it's not a car in any way, but nevertheless it is protected from weather. It's capable of doing 2 things. One is to carry people, the other one is to carry goods while it's not being used to move people in the city. Now these are nice renderings, but let me show you the thing itself. This is just a very lightweight chassis of a bicycle. On top of that we have a light shell that can hold all the communication, navigation, CV, AI, and so forth systems, but as well protect the driver and protect the goods while they're being delivered. And here you're seeing the nice PV, and you're probably familiar with this landscape, Jose, just around the corner from MIT main building. Very, very slow, but this is intended because we're driving on bike lanes. We're not driving on the streets themselves. And you're going to see now a car going 90 miles per hour. Did you see that? But this car is going to stop in about 5 seconds on a traffic light and stand there. And on average, it will have the same driving speed as the PEV. So the PEV is driving on 12 miles per hour. The car will drive on 12 miles per hour, even if it's a Ferrari. Now that's what the PEV is seeing, and we're doing a lot of off-the-shelf development here. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of autonomy. We're not fighting Google or Tesla or any other company. We buy what we can buy, the cheapest as it is, and it's becoming, in the power of 10 cheaper every year. And all the LiDAR systems, all the CV, everything is being built off the shelf and developed onto the platform of the PEV. You can see it doing computer vision and recognition here, lane detection, avoidance of pedestrians and so forth. We're deploying the PEV all over the world. We have tests in Andorra, in Taipei, which I'm actually going to inaugurate a new city science lab next week, and as well as, of course, at MIT. And you're seeing different levels of development here of the PEV. We look at that more as a platform than an endpoint tool. Beyond building the PEV, we're mapping how the PEV will affect the city. So if we move from regular cars to electric cars, and from electric cars to shared electric autonomous cars, all of these areas, all of these red areas in the city, which are now parking lots, are probably going to be empty and could be reused for something else. And then the question is, what can we do with them? So all of these red areas, right, are parking lots that we can clear up and do something else with. So that brings me to the second research topic, but up until this point, is there any questions? Or Professor Park, do you want to mention something?
No, I think I'll sum up later on, at the end.
Any questions?
질문 있으세요? Okay.
Okay. So we cleared up some land in the city, and now we can build. What are we going to build? So the question is pretty big at the moment, because all of the red dots that you see here are basically cities in the US that young entrepreneurs, millennials, young couples cannot afford living in them. Now it's a big deal, because if they cannot live in the city, they cannot create in the city, and they cannot be those entrepreneurs that we all want them to be. And many mayors are now tackling this question. This is the mayor of New York, Mike Bloomberg, a few years ago, developing a modular micro-unit of about 300 square foot that is made for these people, for these millennials. And you can see him standing inside the outskirts of that unit. Now, if you live in a 300 square foot, which is basically a small hotel room, you need some flexibility, right? So the bed is becoming a desk. The desk is becoming another type of furniture. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to fit all of your needs. But when this question arrived to Boston, we asked ourselves, can we do the same thing, but even better, with 200 square feet? So even smaller, about 20 square meters, right? And that led us to the MIT City Home project. What you're seeing here, this is real picture, so it's not edited or anything. We had students living in the lab within this one of these units that we have developed there. And within this unit, which we called architectural robotics, we incorporate all of the functions that are needed for these micro units to be activated. So we have the bed, the desk, we have voice control, hand gestures, and of course, at the end of the day, we can have a party with our friends. But basically, all of these functions are composed within one single architectural unit. Now,
that already exists in Hong Kong and in Tokyo. I mean, this is not new. Maybe in the USA, but in Tokyo, I've seen that.
Cool. Okay. There are cars, many different manufacturers. There are other elements that are being created by other people. I'm not saying this is the first place where a folding bed was invented. There was folding beds in the 19th century. The question is how cheap you do it, how easy it is to recreate. And actually, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but we're now collaborating with IKEA to make it as a platform that you can basically build for your house. So without doing it one-off, you can actually buy it off the shelf, which is a bit different thing. But let's keep on going. When in New York, we had maybe 2 or 3 different functions. In the case of the MIT City Home, we have about 9 different features embedded within the system itself, which you can all control through your cell phone. So if you have friends coming in at the evening and you left your bed messy in the morning, you just click a few clicks on your phone and you get the entire house set up for you. These are some of the experiments we did in the lab. Of course, not all of them went into the MIT City Home unit. We're not expecting all the beds to fall from the sky. But these were good experiments for us to understand how this system could be employed. Last year, MIT City Home went from a student project, student just like you, that started at the group, went from a student project to become a very successful spin-off named Ori, which is now selling all over the world. We're actually not selling to private to private clients just because the demand is higher than we expected. We're selling directly to developers, and we're working with the developers to embed the city home units within their building. And as I mentioned, IKEA is now collaborating with us to build it as a bare bones system which you can incorporate your own furniture into that. So you're just buying the very own shell of the MIT City Home unit and then can fit other IKEA products into this system. Now, we're not only looking at the house, we're using the same technologies that we've developed for the MIT City Home and Ori in the office space. So how do you create a real functioning open space that you can control and activate to your own needs without the need to move furniture? Just look at the room you're sitting in now. This room has only one function. You cannot do other stuff in this room. But with the same technologies that we have developed for the MIT City Home, and here you can see some of the students' work, we can think about that. And we're currently developing three main elements. We have the amoeba wall, which is a programmable wall, basically, that you can shape and change to your needs whenever you're planning a meeting or some gathering. We have the future office work, which is kind of a more composed version of the amoeba wall. And then we have the SLEEPX escape pods, which are basically separated units which allow meeting points and kind of gathering areas within an existing office. Again, very modular and easy to use. What we are more interested in is actually to understand how people activate themselves within those building spaces. So for that, we have created a network of sensors or platform of sensors that we call termites. Termites are those tiny ants that live behind your wall. Mm-hmm. And the same thing goes with the termites here. We're creating a platform that allows you to connect all of these off-the-shelf sensors. So for example, humidity, presence detection, ambient lights, motion, carbon dioxide, all of these go to the cloud. You can put these termites behind your wall and they're charging remotely and connect remotely to the network and give you a lot of information of how people activate your devices or your city home unit if you want. And what you're seeing here is data visualization of the same activations that were gathered by the termites. We're also creating some tangible user interfaces to explain how people behave. Now, this is not invasive, so we don't tap into your phone or put something on your wrist to understand how you use the space. We just collect the data in an anonymized way, and then we interpret that through machine learning to understand who is who, which are the people that are using it, what were they doing, and so forth. This is another depiction of the same data. We have a global map now of all the termites in the world that you have deployed. We have a few hundreds of these being deployed in a school in Andorra, and that's what you're seeing here, as well as creating an augmented reality version of the same termite data being gathered and then being visualized through an AR device here. I want to jump into our third and last research topic, which is the Cityscope, and kind of the reason why I'm here today. So we talked about mobility and we talked about urban spaces, but I think that the bigger question is how do we incorporate all of that together into the city? So as we saw before in the case of Seoul, how do we think about the city as an holistic system that can incorporate all of these systems in a good way? We know that future cities are data-driven, but we also know that people are afraid to talk about cities. So this is why a few years ago we started dealing with Legos. And the reason we do that with Legos is because we realize that people are more comfortable to interact with Legos, to play with them, and to change them. But we actually look at them as data units that we can module, put into algorithms, and eventually project a lot of information onto. So that was one of our early prototypes where we have projected anything from satellite view, mobility modes in the city, solar radiation, wind flows, land use, all the way to, for example, where the money goes. So what you're seeing here, these are centers where you have venture capital within the city. This building, for example, holds 180 startups next to MIT. We've got billions of dollars in venture capital, but this dark building is a federal building of the Department of Transportation, so zero money. Right? This is a view that you usually don't see in the city. A similar layer that is usually kind of hidden is, for example, social media. This is Twitter being geolocated to its physical location in the city. So what you're seeing here, every time somebody is tweeting something about the Media Lab, this highlights here and show us where this person is. We're augmenting Cityscope with many other tangible user interfaces. So I mentioned before augmented reality. We have virtual reality, XR, as well as those nifty handhelds that can augment the experience and basically give you much more information about how the city is activated. But the goal behind all of that is to understand how we get to the core values of the city. How do we get to the density, proximity, and diversity that I mentioned at the beginning that are creating much more successful cities than the ones we usually dub as smart cities. The old model of city planning or city design is this. Somebody is drawing a nice drawing for you and telling you that this is going to be the future. But there is zero data behind that. This is a rendering. It's a nice rendering, but I can draw anything I want. The question is, if we can create new models that are science-based and evidence-based that can give us the real information about how the future in those cities would be. And this is what we're aiming to do. We're building urban performance matrices that are collaborating all of these elements, density, diversity, proximity, and through the interactable tools, we allow you to do real-time modeling to understand the effects. So what you're seeing here, the users are physically changing and doing design in real time, and then the system is reacting to their deeds in accordance to the density, diversity, and proximity. And it's a completely different lecture that I can give you on how we build that into an algorithmic model, but that's a complex thing that I'm not going to go into now. But at the end of the day, that's how we see the future of planning or future of city design. We sit together, we have a discussion around a physical tool, but eventually we're always being mirrored and always being tested against an algorithmic brain behind that. Now, this project got a lot of attention in the past few years, specifically like this article from The Guardian, can the most analogous of toys really be a modern urban planning tool? And that was nice. But as I mentioned before, we're in the Media Lab, and the spirit of the Media Lab is that you have to deploy everything you do, otherwise you're dying. Deploy or die. So we didn't want to die. So in the past few years, we have deployed Cityscope all over the world. You see a partial list of all the cities and countries we are working with. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of cities that we're working with right now. Here we go. So we did a lot of work on energy and walkability in different cities. In the city of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, we're asked to look at 1 square kilometer of an area and redesign that both for walkability and for energy consumption. So we collaborated with the Sustainable Design Lab of MIT, which are special at daylighting and energy, and we build sophisticated energy models that are corresponding to the real-timeness of the Cityscope platform. So what you're seeing here, this is the same square being developed in the Lego platform that we have, and then augmented with the energy modeling tools designed by the Sustainability and UMI tool from MIT. And what you're seeing here, this is a real-time video of the planners in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. You can see them with their kind of classical clothing, playing with the Legos and designing their city for walkability. Now, the way they do it is they're getting feedback in real time from the system. Green is walkable, red is not walkable. Green is good, red is bad. It's quite simple. But it's not simplistic because the algorithms behind that are really doing the math of how walkable it is, how much time it's going to take you to go to any place, and so forth. A similar thing was done in Brisbane, in Australia, where we helped the local planning authority to design a city for, again, for walkability. The blue ones are working places, the red ones are housing, and how do you create mixture between them in a way that will be efficient and reduce the traveling time for cars. And a similar thing was done in Toronto. I'm going to skip this one. We had an interesting project with the city of Boston where we developed a Cityscope platform for designing bus rapid transit, BRT. BRT is those very good buses that are different from regular bus, have their own dedicated lanes. They've got prepayments and usually very good infrastructure of stations that makes them very, very close to light rail, but in 1/10 of the cost. In the city of Boston, that was the proposal for 5 new corridors of BRT. And we were asked not only to help with the design, but actually to go to the community and talk to them about what will be the effects of this design. So we designed 3 different Cityscope platforms: a street scale, community scale, and a regional scale that gives you the overview of the entire city. And we had students coming in from the local community to help us build those platforms. So what you're seeing here, this is the city scale, allowing each user to choose and design its own daily routine within the BRT system. And then the system would display those plans over the plan presented by the city with all the externalities. So for example, if somebody added a station, how much would be the cost for that station? If somebody moved the route, how much would be the cost for that? So there is a real-time feedback to the changes. Same thing with the neighborhood scale, a smaller scale, but then allowing the users to really put the station and understand what will be the effect. And then if you don't know what a BRT station is at all, we designed a street scale, a street scale that allow you to really build the street section and understand what will be the effect on the street section itself. You can see here, using also augmented reality, we got real-time data projected into the system. Now I want to jump into this project. So as I mentioned, we have deployed Cityscope in many different places. One of the bigger collaborations we have is with the city-state. It's a very tiny state of Andorra, especially in terms of the East. Andorra has 65,000 people. That's not a state in terms of the world East, but they call themselves a state. They even have a king. Andorra is very much interested in tourism, both in summertime and in wintertime, but there are changes in the world. We have global warming, which is now taking all of the snow from the mountain peaks every year. We have changes to monetary regulations that don't allow you anymore to really hide money in Andorra, which was another profitable endeavor by the Andorrans. So all of these changes brought them to us, asking us to help them to understand better the tourism patterns that are currently happening in the city. We got about 3 years of telecom data, meaning cellular data, your phones. Every time that they talk to the tower, they leave a mark, and we can take these marks and understand how potentially people move and behave in terms of tourism. So these are the cell towers within the outskirts of Andorra. And what you're seeing here, this is basically the raw data, very noisy. We can do a lot with that. But when we put some algorithmic work on that, mostly machine learning, embedded with the street network map, you can start and understand who are the vehicles, who are the pedestrians, what are their origins, which countries they're coming from, what do they do, and so forth. All of that allows us to really dive into their behavioral models and understand that, for example, the Russians like this casino, and that the Spanish people prefer to go to that restaurant. But this is completely anonymized, so we don't know nothing about these users. We actually get a string of about 20 different digits that defines each of the users, but we don't know who they are. And that's very important because we're not tapping to their phones, we're actually just curious about the location. If we put more algorithmic work on that, we can start and identify areas that congestion might happen. Usually when you use your Google Maps, you get real-time congestion, but you rarely can see that historically, and never you can see that in terms of pedestrians. You don't see congestion of pedestrians, but there are some streets in the world that you cannot walk into because of how many people there are. Try to walk on 42nd Street at 8 a.m. in the morning. It's basically a river of people. Same goes here. 2 or 3 times a year, there are big events in Andorra, and they bring thousands of people and creating congestion in that area. One of the latest, and I'm showing you, you're the first one to see that, it's very new. We're actually now using a more sophisticated piece of data that gives us about 50,000 reads from the city every second. That means we know basically the location of everyone all the time, and we can start and gather this information in what we call clustering algorithms. That gives us basically how people not only behave
what algorithm?
clustering.
Clustering. Okay.
So not only how they behave by themselves, but also how they operate within their global community. So you can imagine that we can gather all the Spanish that potentially went to the same bar and stayed there for more than 2 hours and try to understand if there were relationships between them. This is kind of, again, completely anonymized. We haven't asked them, we haven't done a survey or put anything to their phones. This is just by the one reading their phone is making every few seconds with the cell tower. Now, as I mentioned before, we don't keep it on the screen. We don't care about data visualization at all. What we care about is intervention in the city in a way that will be beneficial to the Andorrans. So what you're seeing here is the Cityscope model on which we project all of this information. We deployed a small version of it last year, exactly a year ago in Barcelona Smart Cities Conference. You can see the small model here. And then earlier this year, in August, we have deployed the Andorra Innovation Space, which is physically in Andorra, with a 3.5 meter long Cityscope platform with all of this information, all of this data that we have gathered, including an interactable platform area that can help the local planning authority and the community to plan better their future Andorra. You can see the same interaction that I showed you before from Riyadh and other places is also embedded here. And on top of all of that, we have the same augmented reality features that allow you to also see a depiction of how the city might look like when you design it in accordance. Kind of one of the last things I want to show about that is that we are also adding a layer of solar and energy simulation. So we're actually using a high quality LiDAR solar potential analysis algorithm that is basically flying above the city. There is a plane flying above the city, taking photos in very, very high quality and giving us basically a model that allows us to understand which roofs of which buildings would be beneficial for solar panels and which less. We're creating an online community engagement platform that allows the public, the participants in Andorra, to understand which roofs would be beneficial to put solar on, what will be the cost, what will be the revenue, and so forth. So kind of doing it in an engagement process. And of course, all of this information eventually finds itself also into the Cityscope platform. So then if you now add a building here, it will change this algorithm and you see a new type of solar production happening there in real time. So this is from Andorra. So as I mentioned, city science labs are spread all over the world. In 4 days, I'm going to go to Taipei and start our new lab, the City Science Lab in Taipei, which is more dedicated to the PEV work. As you can see, we had Helsinki, Andorra, and Shanghai just from the past few months. And I'll be very happy to have one in Seoul in the next few months as well. So this is for me. Thank you.
기본적으로 딱 보니까 MIT는 요즘에 하이테크를 이용해서 데이터를 그죠 활용해서 다시 어떻게 리디자인을 해서 사람들이 뭐 충분하게 걸어 다닐 수 있도록 아니면은 에너지를 조금 더 활용할 수 있도록 젊은 층들이 어떻게 도시를 잘 활용을 할 수 있도록 뭐 이런 여러 가지 일들을 하는데 옛날에 올드 모델 같은 경우에는 사람이 그렸지만 이제는 뭐 거의 저 컴퓨터나 뉴 모델로 각 기술 기반의 도시 재생을 한다라는 게 중요한 거고 저희는 지금 스위치 토큰 뭐 이런 거에서는 아까 보여줬던 솔라스코프 이런 거를 굉장히 관심 있어 하는데 그죠? 옛날에 이제 그림을 그렸는데 요즘에는 레고로 사람들이 자기가 자기 도시를 어떻게 꾸밀지 써가지고 같이 모여가지고 한다라는 거고 아까 보니까 어떤 빌딩 이제 위에서 이제 정보 데이터를 딱 보고 어떤 빌딩에 어떤 그 솔라 지붕을 덮어야 할까 솔라를 덮어야 하는 그 지붕이 딱 나오네요 보니까 그죠? 예, 데이터로 나오고 그 지붕 위에 어떻게 태양광을 덮을 때에는 비용은 어느 정도고 이득은 얼마인가 이런 것까지 계산이 다 나온다 이런 게 정말 중요한 거고 전체적으로는 여러 가지 데이터 새로운 기술이 나와서 어떤 사람들이 어떤 식당을 가고 어떻게 움직이는가를 따라서 도시를 리디자인하자 하고 있는 일 이런 것들을 지금 이 선생님께서 설명을 하셨습니다. 우리 이현수 교수님 한마디 좀 해주세요. 이거 보니까 시티 재생 우리 교수님 예, 한번 생각한 거 아무거나.
그 MIT에서 이제 그 켄 랄슨 옛날에 미디어랩 회장 저를 하셨는데 저희가 그 전에 상당히 이제 다양한 계획을 해왔더랬어요. 그 정보랑 핫패스 얘기를 하면 이 사실 레고 갖고 증강현실을 하는 거며 그다음에 주택이나 이런 거를 이케아 시스템하고 연결해서 모듈러 코디네이션 해서 진짜 주택이 라이프스타일 프로덕트가 되게끔 굉장히 베리어블하게 사람들이 바로 컴포넌트만 주문하면 바로 내 집 앞에 올 수 있을 정도 이제 그런 것들을 꿈꾸고 있었고 그다음에 이제 비클에 관한 프로젝트도 수년 전에 와서 이제 도시를 혁신시킬 수 있는 그런 프로젝트를 하게 됐다고 설명을 제가 들었는데 오늘 보니까 굉장히 많이 진전을 세 가지 다 제가 알고 있는 거 다 한 것 같아요. 근데 이제 중요한 거는 처음에 이제 어반 도시 시티에 관한 거는 모든 사실 도시들이 뭐 르네상스부터 어떻게 저기를 발전해 왔는지는 다 아실 건데 이게 굉장히 이제 피지컬 디스턴스가 굉장히 사실 중요했는데 어떤 비글을 쓰느냐에 따라서 그런데 지금 이제 새로운 시스템을 개발함으로써 이 바이시클도 아닌 그냥 일본도 사실 굉장히 많이 하고 있거든요. 어디나 내가 휠체어를 진짜 뭐 장애인을 위한 휠체어가 아니라 어디나 나의 개인적인 퍼스널 카를 타고 이동할 수 있는 시스템으로 가면 굉장한 도시가 이제 혁신이 되겠죠. 그런 차원에서 이제 굉장히 중요성을 얘기한 것 같고요. 그 다음에 이제 주택 내 시스템은 사실은 하나는 이케아나 이런 데서 우리도 얼마든지 그런 걸 할 수 있어요. 아까 호세도 지금 이런 할 수 있다고 되게 굉장히 스몰 스페이스를 효율적으로 이용하는 일본이나 홍콩에는 사실 기발한 아이디어들이 굉장히 많이 해서 적응을 하려고 하겠죠. 모든 생활을 다 담아야 되니까. 그런데 제가 보기에 이제 저거는 하나의 이제 주택을 하나의 로봇 시스템으로 발전시키는 하나의 단계에 있는 거라는 그런 거로 봐지고요. 그 다음에 도시는
뭐 때문에?
이제 우리가 이제 저게 도시재생 방법을 다 얘기하지는 않아요. 도시재생이 굉장히 복잡한 거기 때문에 왜냐하면 하드웨어나 소프트웨어나 컨텐츠 이게 전부 휴먼웨어가 다 묶어 있는 게 도시재생이기 때문에 쉽지는 않지만 일단 기술적으로는 이게 사용자들이 굉장히 다양한 디프런트 스테이크홀더의 그 도시는 갈등 문제거든요. 그런데 디프런트 스테이크홀더들이 다 같이 참여해서 바로 증강현실로 볼 수 있게 한다는 그 시스템입니다. 그래서 우리나라도 그 이제 사용자 참여 기법으로 해서 디지털 도구를 좀 개발을 하는데 굉장히 이제 어드밴스되게 수준 높게 개발하고 있는 거, 많은 데이터들을 활용해서 하는 것 같습니다. 제가 보면서 들은 내용을 간단히 얘기를 했습니다.
우리 이현수 교수님이 주거환경 뭐 이 분야 도시재생에서는 한국의 1인자시니까 설명했습니다. 오케이, 한번 다시 쳐주시고요. 네네네.